Making headlines for this week of February the 12th. TPP uproar. Controversial document officially ratified, and another battle begins. Earth wisdom rising. Indigenous from New Zealand to Sweden to Canada, setting the tone for change. Banks on the edge. Several big banks on the verge of collapse, threatening the banking cabal house of cards. And discovery or deception. Gravitational waves theory claims one thing, but is it what it appears to be?
With news around, upon, within, and beyond our planet, the program making disclosure official. This is Cosmic Vision News. Here is Jeffrey West.
Greetings and blessings to all. The uproar is beginning in light of the announcement within the last week that numerous countries have now signed the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, or TPP, as it is being called. Back on January 21st, Channel News Asia reported the following. The TPP aims to create the world's biggest free trade area, bringing together 12 Pacific Rim countries, including the United States, Japan, and Australia. Work on the deal began in earnest in 2008, and New Zealand Trade Minister Todd McClay said that the document would finally be signed in Auckland, the capital of New Zealand, on February 4th. The signing ceremony will mark the end of the TPP negotiating process, he said. Following signature, all 12 countries will be able to begin their respective domestic ratification processes and will have up to 2 years to complete that before the agreement enters into force. On February 4th, RT has reported that a group of around 1,000 activists protesting against the TPP have blocked roads in Auckland as the participant states' delegations gathered there to formally sign the controversial agreement. The article continues, adding that activists oppose the agreement, arguing that it will lead to job loss, stagnant wages, and increasing inequality, among other negative consequences for workers. They also argue that TPP will likely protect the rights of large investors and corporations at the expense of workers. Protesters are also worried about currency manipulation, environmental and health protections, food safety, and internet privacy. The signing of the TPP went ahead anyways, to the uproar of a crowd of more than 1,000 people. New Zealand Prime Minister John Key said he is delighted with the deal, telling the attendees that the agreement will enhance the prosperity of our people. New Zealand is proud to be involved in this whole process. I want to acknowledge the courage and vision of my fellow TPP leaders, he said. The final draft document was reached last October after 5 years of negotiations and covers about 40% of the global economy. The agreement aims to establish common trading standards for all 12 signatories, the US, Australia, Brunei, Canada, Chile, Japan, Malaysia, Mexico, New Zealand, Peru, Singapore, and Vietnam. Many are arguing that the document is flawed, including a UN expert on human rights. RT reported on February 2nd a top UN human rights official as calling upon the 12 nations to reject the massive agreement because it is out of step with today's international human rights regime. This could be a loaded statement, so some discernment may be required with that statement from the UN official. The article quotes the UN official Alfred de Zayas as saying that the agreement is fundamentally flawed and should not be signed or ratified unless provision is made to guarantee the regulatory space of states. I am concerned that, notwithstanding enormous opposition by civil society worldwide, 12 countries are about to sign an agreement, which is the product of secret negotiations without multi-stakeholder democratic consultation. Trade agreements are not stand-alone legal regimes, but must conform with fundamental principles of international law, including transparency and accountability. Trade agreements must not delay, circumvent, undermine, or make impossible the fulfillment of human rights treaty obligations, said Zayas. The article also added that Zayas was referring to indications that the TPP will come with a private tribunal system or an investor-state dispute settlement process, something known as ISDS, in which multinational corporate entities will be granted broad powers to challenge sovereign nations' government regulations, rules, actions, and court rulings if those laws or policies are perceived as cutting in on intellectual property values and profits. The Government of Canada is also proudly sharing the news of its involvement in the agreement. A government web page shares the following. The Government of Canada is committed to being transparent, open, and consultative with Canadians on the TPP. As part of this commitment, the Government of Canada has already consulted and will continue to consult Canadians as well as undertake full parliamentary debate. As to whether or not the Canadian government truly values the input of people across the country remains to be seen, especially the voices of the natural Indigenous peoples, as opposed to those who are part of the corporate entity known as the Assembly of First Nations, and those who surrendered their natural rights and freedoms to the corporate legislation known as the Indian Act. What I believe this represents are the attempts by the global cabal to get certain protections into place that will allow them to win in a court of law because they seem to naively believe that commercial rules, given the force of law, will stand the test of time, because no one outside of their circles would likely have the legal knowledge and the courage to take them on in their own game. Having this larger massive agreement in place will very likely override many other smaller rules that people may attempt to take to court, and the corrupted courts may allow them to win on some levels so that they will keep spending money on expensive legal defenses until they are either forced into bankruptcy or into dropping the case to avoid bankruptcy. Such are some of the tactics of this global cabal. The good news, however, is that given the current rate of implosion of the global financial markets, it does not seem very likely at this time that this agreement will succeed. What this agreement is doing, however, is empowering groups of people worldwide to become more informed and more empowered to start standing up and speaking out against agreements and actions such as those of the TPP. Among those speaking out on numerous levels are various Indigenous nations around the world in their own unique ways. In other geopolitical news, as has been reported over the last 2 weeks in particular, the Mohawk Initiative has now been launched, and letters have been delivered via registered mail to most of the people and entities that were named on this broadcast over the last few weeks. As was mentioned last week, we will begin to get an idea of who among these people and entities will choose to engage the Mohawks and begin to cooperate with them, and which entities will not. At that time, after the 14-day grace period has passed from the day in which the person or entity received the letter, a decision will be taken as to who will be included in possible future legal actions to secure stolen lands and stolen monies from the Mohawk Trust Fund, since before the Corporation of Canada came into existence. There is still some Indigenous news to share from around the world this week, and there is also some news from Canada, but first we start in New Zealand. In the follow-up to the ratification of the TPP agreement in New Zealand, it was reported on the TAP News Wire on February 4th that Kingi Taurua, a prominent Ngāpuhi elder at Waitangi's Te Mare, sent a formal notice of veto of the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement to the embassies and trade departments of its proposed partner countries and has requested that the Queen intervene on the issue. There is both good news and not so good news with this announcement. although it is good news in the sense that at least one of the Indigenous nations of New Zealand are standing up and speaking out, the problem is that they have asked the Queen to intervene on the matter. From what I have been able to establish so far, it appears that the term Maori, or Maori, seems to apply to all Indigenous peoples in New Zealand, so please accept my apologies if this is incorrect or if my pronunciation is incorrect. According to Wikipedia, the Maori people are the Indigenous Polynesian people of New Zealand. The Maori originated with settlers from eastern Polynesia and arrived in New Zealand in several waves of canoe voyages at some time between 1250 and 1300 in the Common Era. Over several centuries in isolation, the Polynesian settlers developed a unique culture that became known as the Maori, with their own language, a rich mythology, distinctive crafts, and performing arts. The arrival of the Europeans starting around the 17th century led to a decline in the Maori culture. Although relations were initially good, they deteriorated. By the 20th century, there was a re-emergence of the culture, and a protest movement emerged in the 1960s advocating Maori issues. The Maori elders are not seemingly aware that the British monarchy is as much a part of the problem as the government itself. Asking the Queen to intervene is like asking the fox to investigate itself for alleged crimes in stealing chickens from the henhouse. For those truly seeking to live as natural humans with their rights and freedoms intact, it makes no sense in asking the very entity that is responsible for the enslavement and removal of those rights and freedoms to investigate itself for crimes alleged against the entity. The article continues. The document, referring to the one submitted by the Waitangi, cites the Treaty of Waitangi and the 1835 Declaration of Independence of New Zealand, and states that the New Zealand government does not have due authority to sign the TPP agreement without the agreement of Maori elders, which has not been given. An article on the tvnewzealand.co.nz website on February 3rd has reported that Prime Minister John Keyes has decided not to attend the Waitangi Day celebration, which was on February 6th. Waitangi Day is a national holiday that celebrates the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi, New Zealand's founding document, on that date in 1840. The TVNZ website reports that Keyes stated no intention of being present at the celebrations involving Indigenous nations because of alleged safety concerns, and the Keyes statement that the Indigenous elders are attempting to put a gag order on him and not allow him to share the government's position on the TPP agreement. No doubt, a few of you probably caught the irony in that statement, as the government went ahead without the input of the Indigenous nations to sign an agreement, and then claims to say that the Indigenous will not allow him to express the government position when it was clearly expressed already in an act of not involving the Indigenous people in the first place. It is unclear at this time whether violence was truly advocated by the Maori Indigenous elders. The TAP Newswire article adds the following. Last year, the Waitangi Tribunal found that Maori did not cede sovereignty when they signed the Treaty of Waitangi, and it is apparently this sovereignty by descent, or tino rangatiratanga, that Mr. Taurua is claiming he is able to use to formally veto the trade agreement. The document closes by stating that Mr. Taurua does not give his permission to the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement being signed by the visiting officials from overseas, which position I take to the full extent of my right to regulate trade in that district, according to him. The Declaration of Independence, which was approved by the Queen's predecessor, King William IV, and ratified by the British government, states that Maori elders would gather at Waitangi each autumn in order to regulate trade. It seems unlikely that the Maori would engage in intentional physical confrontation without just provocation. The Maori elders chose Barry Brailsford, an historian and archaeologist, to tell their story. On the web page of the publisher for Brailsford's book, Brailsford writes the following: "When the Maori elders placed in my basket the hidden knowledge of the Waitaha nation, I was carried into the ancient Polynesian seaways and the lore of the navigation stars, propelled along the mountain trails of the sacred stone, sent into the remarkable gardens in the ocean and the shore, wrapped in the cloak of the secret histories, and given access to the highest houses of learning." A visit to the Waitaha website reveals that this is a nation of peace. On their website, it is written that traditionally the Waitaha nation are a matriarchal people who followed the philosophies of peace known as Rongo Mara Areoa, the entity of peace. Incidentally, there have been no weapons of war found in the oldest archaeological sites in our land of Aotearoa in New Zealand. The teachings from Wananga schools placed high value on genetic memory, patterns of memory, and passing on the traditions of their ancestors by teaching the grandchildren the way of living in a reverent way with all things and all people. Humility, deep respect, and self-discipline were the concepts and values interwoven in this way of life. The Waitaha have also stated on their website that they have had to keep hidden their origins and their history until now. The website states the following: "Until now, we have hidden our beginnings and all that followed in the shadows. In this way, we protected our knowledge in the silence of the Ware Wananga, the school of learning of Waitaha. Now is the time for our treasures to be brought into the light. We do this for the children and their children and all who call this land home. We are the Tane Matua, and we follow Rongo Mare Roa, the feminine entity of peace." An article on the generationsspirit.com website by Kimberly Patterson adds a bit more about Brailsford and the Maori story. She writes, "The Waitaha were the first people of Aotearoa, a peaceful, loving people. For hundreds of years, since the decimation of their nation, the story of their very existence has been hidden. It is an amazing story that anywhere on this planet, a gathering of over 200 iwi, or tribes, managed to live in peace without weapons for over 1,000 years. It is a story of healing, because the Waitaha were gardeners who believed that every one of us had to be tended and nurtured and brought into fullness. When the Waitaha nation was broken by warriors who came from the Pacific, the elders decided to protect their ancestors from the violence and warfare. They did that the only way they knew how. Whole generations of their genealogy were erased so that no one might link directly back into their lineage. Brailsford was quoted as saying that everything came together here with such elegance initially. Even some 400 years ago, when the nation was being broken, the elders spoke that the time would come when the stars would form a very special pattern in the sky, and the sacred knowledge would be shared with all. The people of peace, gentle and caring, giving and nurturing, would stand and walk tall again. The stars came into that particular conjunction in 1990. The elders saw it coming in 1988, and the words given to the men were, "We have taken the taonga from the past, the greatest inspiration we have left to give our young people, that they might find the courage and the understanding of the Wairua to step forward into the future." This is Song of Waitaha. The story goes into a visit by Wallace Black Elk of the Lakota Sioux Nation, who visited the Waitaha unannounced, and this opened up a dialogue between the Maori of New Zealand and the Lakota Sioux of Turtle Island, North America. The Maori, like many indigenous nations, have been neglected and overlooked in many cases when it comes to how people should live, especially on lands that were never formally surrendered to corporate entities, such as the British monarchy and national governments. A separate article on February 4th quoted Kingi Taurua, the Maori elder mentioned earlier, as saying that the government treated us like children. There comes a time when action must be taken, especially if the corporate entities are unwilling to acknowledge the voices of the people who elected them. Shifting now to Sweden, and a similar story is unfolding there. The London Guardian and the Barents Observer are among two media reporting on a land claim issue in Sweden. The Guardian article by David Crouch reported on February 3rd that Sweden's nomadic reindeer herders have won a 30-year battle for land rights in a court case that has seen the state accused of racism towards the country's only indigenous people. A decision in Gällivare District Court on Wednesday granted the tiny Sami village of Girjas inside the Arctic Circle exclusive rights to control hunting and fishing in the area, restoring powers stripped from the Sami people, or Laplanders, by Sweden's parliament in 1993. It is a symbolic step towards getting Sami rights acknowledged, and we hope that this verdict can shape policies towards Sami issues in Sweden. That was the main goal, said Åsa Larsson Blind, Vice President of the Sami Council, which represents Sami people in Sweden, Norway, Finland, and Russia. The Barents Observer article by Trude Pettersson added the following, and this information is very important. The court, in its decision, emphasized that the Sami population had used the land much longer than the Swedish state. The main reason for our decision is that the Sami have been using this area since 500 AD, Judge Niklas Lind said to Svenska Television, adding that the Swedish state only became owners of the land in 1887 in connection with the first law on reindeer husbandry. Even if the court decision only concerns a small area of land, she believes it can be of big importance for the whole of Sami, the cultural region traditionally inhabited by the Sami people. Girjas has paved the way for other Sami villages in Sweden, and I believe we will see much more such court cases. Sami, all over the north, can now see it is possible to win. This action, taken by the Sami people and the ruling they have now received, has a similar structure for the Mohawk Initiative. Although the land claim by the Mohawks is currently small, the actions have the potential to help many other indigenous groups and humanity in general. In Canada, there may be a few unusual things happening within the government of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. It was reported by News1130.com on February 5th that Trudeau held a meeting with all the mayors of major cities in Canada. Although it may be seen as a good thing, it is unusual because it is not a meeting that happens very often, and it never happened under the leadership of former Prime Minister Harper. 5 days after this, on the 10th, a statement appearing on the Prime Minister's web pages state the following. The Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, today announced that he and the premiers will meet with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis leaders on March 2nd. The Prime Minister will then host a First Ministers meeting with premiers on March 3rd. Both meetings will take place in Vancouver, British Columbia. Climate change is the publicly stated reason for the meeting and is being promoted as an opportunity for Canada to become a leader in the global clean growth economy and to responsibly deliver on our climate commitments while delivering real benefits for Canadians. Referring to Canada's Indigenous peoples, Trudeau was quoted as saying that Canada's Indigenous peoples have a sacred relationship with the earth. Their unique perspective will help guide us in developing policies that ensure our land, air, and water are protected for future generations. As has been mentioned previously, however, the Trudeau government has not invited the Indigenous nations that have retained their natural rights and freedoms. The Mohawks have not been invited, nor to my knowledge the Indigenous nations of the west coast of Canada that are still naturally free. So there is some suspicion regarding the actions of the Canadian government, and within the next 2 weeks, CVN will be able to report on how the Canadian government plans to respond or not respond to the letter submitted through the Mohawk Initiative. In Europe, former Greek finance minister Yanis Varoufakis is back on the geopolitical stage this week as he appeared in public to launch a new European left-wing movement. The movement is called DM, or Democracy in Europe Movement. With all the problems arising out of Europe at this time, especially concerning alleged refugees, the people are attempting to find a way to speak out, and Varoufakis appears to be attempting to give a voice to the people. We start with this report from RT.
RT's Peter Oliver was in Berlin to witness Varoufakis launch his new left-wing party, DM25.
Everyone's favourite former Greek finance minister is back. Yanis Varoufakis' new project, the Democracy in Europe Movement 2025, is being launched here in Berlin. Well, Varoufakis himself says it aims to bring together pro-European radical thinkers to take the challenge to Europe's elites in Brussels and its bankers in Frankfurt. Plenty of people gathering here to listen to what he has to say. Let's listen in ourselves.
The European Union is disintegrating, and it is doing so quite fast. You only have to put together the words European, foreign, and policy to end up with a joke. If the European Union is disintegrating because of its terrible governance and architecture, what is the solution? What is the only alternative? The only alternative is to try something we've never tried before. A political movement that starts everywhere in Europe at once, cross-border, independently of prior political party affiliations, that has one simple objective: to get Europeans around a metaphorical table, digital table, in forums like this one tonight, to discuss as Europeans their common problems and what we want our common solutions to these common problems to be.
Well, we certainly saw some of the Varoufakis panache from when he was Greek finance minister. However, at the launch of this new movement, real answers to the big questions were thin on the ground. Varoufakis himself saying that this was down to the fact that it's brand new and he hopes to build for the future of what he says of putting the demos back into democracy in Europe. Reporting from Berlin for RT, I'm Peter Oliver.
On the opendemocracy.net website, the manifesto is available to be read. One part of the manifesto describes a Europe that aims to be democratic, transparent, united, realistic, decentralized, pluralist, egalitarian, cultured, social, productive, sustainable, ecological, creative, technological, international, peaceful, and open, while also being historically minded. A PDF file is available for downloading on the dm25.org website. The pledge of the movement, according to the document, is to fight together against a European establishment deeply contemptuous of democracy, to democratize the European Union, to end the reduction of all political relations into relations of power masquerading as merely technical decisions, to subject the EU's bureaucracy to the will of sovereign European peoples, to dismantle the habitual domination of corporate power over the will of citizens, to repoliticize the rules that govern our single market and common currency. All links will be available in the show summary for this story. In financial news, the geo-economic sphere continues to shake and implode, with numerous pieces of news moving around the globe at this time. On silverdoctors.com website on February 10th, former Bank for International Settlements, the BIS chief economist William White, gave an interview with Max Rangley. The following is a selected excerpt from White's interview. White was quoted as saying that the fundamental problem here, as I see it anyway, is that the European banking system is still broken. As you know, the European economy is heavily reliant on small and medium-sized enterprises, and they are reliant in turn on bank financing. Unfortunately, it is these firms that are not getting the bank financing that they need. Until that gets fixed, we will continue to have a huge problem in Europe. There appears to be something wrong with these comments. Firstly, it is more than just the European system that is broken. It is the entire system of fiat currency and the fractional reserve model of banking implemented and controlled worldwide that is the problem. White also states that Europe relies on small and medium businesses, and while this may be true, White seems to be giving a subtle request for negative interest rates to be implemented. Once these negative rates are implemented, banks will be charged a fee to store their money at central banks, meaning that the central banks will be telling smaller banks to give out more and more loans, and this could be even more disastrous on the small and medium businesses. It is not the financing of the small and medium businesses that will fix the problem. What needs to happen is the same thing that happened in Iceland. Big banks must be allowed to go bankrupt without being bailed out, and politicians and bankers must be arrested for their crimes. Silver Doctors also published another article on February the 11th by Steve St. Angelo, reporting that demand for gold has had an unprecedented upsurge for the day. According to this article, the markets have finally cracked and things are about to become a lot more interesting. Today, the price of gold surged more than $60 and silver 60 cents as the markets crumbled. The article refers to at least one online gold dealer in the UK that was experiencing a huge rush in sales of physical gold. The article is suggesting that something very big is about to happen with silver and with gold. This information is to be taken with discernment because, although we know that the stock markets are rigged and have been for many months and years, the same could be said about gold and metals. The one comforting thought, however, is that sources have speculated that China has now allegedly taken control of the gold fix, so it is possible that there is less corruption now in the price of gold and metals. CVN reported last week on the situation facing Deutsche Bank in Germany. In an article this week on the Event Chronicle website, the article writes the following: with Deutsche Bank forced to issue a statement defending its liquidity today after its stock crashed 10% to financial crisis lows, implying that a $70 trillion derivatives book may be on the verge of collapse, we thought it apropos to revisit Jim Willey's dire warning that if Deutsche Bank goes down, it will be Lehman times 5. In a recent interview on Silver Doctors, Jim Willey had this to say.
Why don't we get right to business here? Why is Deutsche Bank the potential trigger event to watch for here?
Well, let me do a preface that in the last 6 or 8 weeks, there have been 3 banks that have been put in focus by my best source in European banking. And he's got his fingers in a number of different areas. He's got some contacts in Germany and others in London. But the real big focus that he has been giving me, and this is since June, since late May, he says, Jim, 3 banks are in danger of being overturned. 3 banks are in trouble. And the 3 banks are fighting every single night to fight off insolvency and bank failure. Failure comes from insolvency combining with the threat immediately of illiquidity. Not enough money to deal with it, not enough capital to handle credit issues and all this stuff, credit requirements, ratios and all that. But he says Citigroup in New York, Barclays in London, and Deutsche Bank in Germany, every single night are in trouble. And then you had Max Kaiser a couple of days ago reinforcing he has a Swiss hedge fund manager who says that Deutsche Bank is on suicide watch. And I think you put a note immediately out on that saying, yeah, this confirms something that Jim Willey has been talking about. Yeah, I've been mentioning Deutsche Bank as a potential trigger for the last month or so. In fact, I had an entire chapter with 4 or 5, 6 pages in my Money War report for July. It was just for the potential trigger event that Deutsche Bank would provide. The important thing to keep in mind about Deutsche Bank is that it won't go down alone if it goes down at all. If it fails, it'll take down 3 or 4, 5 or 6 or 10 or 15 other banks. And it won't be right away. It'll be 1 or 2 quickly, and then it'll be a third and a fourth, and then a couple weeks later another one. And before you know it, all of Italy and their major banks are kaput. I mentioned kaput because that's a German word. A year ago, we were talking about LIBOR. And some people thought, well, the big banks are going to have some really big lawsuits here, and some of them are going to fail. Well, the lawsuits are being contained. The court system is very much a friend of the banks. LIBOR really didn't result in much, but my belief is that Deutsche Bank and its potential failure and its constant overnight risk of failure is indeed somewhat a LIBOR risk, but a little bit more a risk having to do with their Forex derivatives. In other words, derivatives that the banks use to balance off the currencies, the Forex. And believe it or not, in the derivatives world, gold is treated like a currency. Isn't that ironic? Yeah. So the Forex derivatives that the banks are deeply involved in are very much tied to gold. The big immediate threat for Deutsche Bank, though, has to do with their problems in hiding a lot of different debt for the sovereign applications for the European Monetary Union. I'm sorry, the EMU, the euro, the common euro zone. For instance, Greece and Italy had to make their application and satisfy certain debt requirements. They couldn't be over a certain level in total debt. They couldn't be over a certain level for their annual accumulation toward more debt. So what Deutsche Bank did was they falsified some nice big chunks of debt and put it in the form of a currency swap. Let me give a quick example of how devious that is. Suppose you're sitting in your own little world and you've got your credit statement and it shows a $250,000 bad business loan that's really stinking up your credit report. So you call up your favorite Deutsche Bank broker or Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan, pick your criminal enterprise that's your favorite, and you call up and you say, look, I've got a $250,000 debt here. I want to go away. And they say, okay, we can do something clever here. We can pay off your debt so your credit report looks good. And we can establish this $250,000, let's convert it into euros so it'll be $190,000. I'm sorry, $190,000. And we'll convert that into a euro swap. And we'll keep it off the books. So you got this $250,000 debt stinking up your credit report. It goes away and is replaced by something hidden in the euro currency swap. Well, that's precisely what was done on a larger macro scale with Greece and Italy, and Deutsche Bank is involved in several of these. And the total that's now becoming disclosed on their corrupt balance sheet is $400 billion. So, apply your typical ratios and you conclude that they're, who knows, 10, 12, 15, $20 billion short for capital requirements. Not only that, but it's fraud. I mean, when was the last time we've seen any of these banks charged with fraud? They're stealing trillions, they're defrauding billions, hundreds of billions, and just running around like this is business as usual. I maintain, John, a very simple point, and I mean this sincerely. The big banks are so criminal that they've converted fraud and criminal activity into a small cost of doing business.
Stefan Stanford writing for the All News Pipeline on February the 6th, writes an article that goes very much into the negativity of all that is happening, and he appears to have very little knowledge, if any, of the unfolding transformation to a new economic paradigm. He seems to be unaware of how to connect the dots to the financial events happening, the political events happening, and the signs that have long been coming from the East, suggesting a very different way of doing business. Marine Khan, writing for the London Telegraph, reported on numerous events in the markets and commodities over the recent weeks, and noted how many investors are becoming acutely aware of something significant happening. Khan writes the following: "Is the current oil price collapse really like anything the world economy has ever experienced?" He goes on to answer the question, writing that for many market watchers, a confluence of factors, led by oil, but encompassing China, the emerging world, and financial markets, are all brewing to create a perfect storm in a global economy that has barely come to terms with the Great Recession. We are in a very unusual situation where market sentiment is on a different nature to anything we've seen before. This coming from a member of the Swedish bank. Unlike previous pre-recessionary eras, the current sell-off has seen commodity prices, equities, and credit conditions all move in dangerous lockstep. As CVN has always stated, we are now in uncharted waters. There are no formulae of past practices that will work now because the old system can no longer work, and this is for more than one reason. It is more than just mere mathematics of the fiat currency system, but it also includes the shift in human consciousness, and it also includes the shift in energies on all levels, including from our very own solar system. Very few will acknowledge this, but perhaps someday someone may be able to say that at least CVN had the foresight to include these factors as contributing, at least in part, to the transformation the geoeconomic paradigm is going through. This transformation is nothing to be feared, unless one is particularly attached to one's material wealth, one's power, and one's possessions. As we shift into a more balanced system, and as people let go of their fears and begin to work together to find interim solutions, new ideas will begin to flow about how to exist outside of a criminally corrupt financial paradigm. Many will begin to find that it is possible to exist outside of being a slave, and although it may not be easy at first, it will certainly be more liberating. As mentioned moments ago, there appears to be an upward movement in the price of gold. However, something very odd seems to be happening in Canada. An article appearing on the Penny Mining Stocks website reported on February 5th that, according to the IMF, Canada sold 1.3 tons of gold reserves. And what is odd is that this represents 43.3% of its total reserves, and they did this in January. As of January 2016, Canada had 3 tons of gold reserves, and as of February, only 1.7 tons left. This is an extremely small amount of physical gold, and considering that the world is apparently moving toward a gold standard, it may suggest that corrupted interests are siphoning gold out of Canada's central bank to fund criminal activities or possibly pay off certain people or entities. The statistics report that in 1955 and 1965, Canada had the most tonnage of gold reserves in its history, at just slightly more than 1,000 tons. Between 1965 to 1975, the reserves dropped to around 700 tons. Between 1980 and 1986, reserves dropped to roughly 650 tons. After 1986, Canada's gold reserves crashed, falling to 100 tons by 1995. From 1995 to 2004, those reserves fell to almost zero. It was in 1974 that former Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau, the father of the current Prime Minister Justin, was forced to sell out Canada's central bank to the interests of the global banking cabal. It was during his leadership where one large amount of gold disappeared. The larger gold sell-off occurred during the conservative leaderships of Brian Mulroney and Kim Campbell, followed by the liberal leadership of Jean Chrétien between the years of 1985 to 2004. This is a mystery that is yet to be resolved. What is also odd is that a chart that appeared in the article showing reported gold reserves for countries indicated that the U.S. allegedly had over 1,800 tons of gold in its reserves. There are many who seem to question this, and apparently so did the Germans. CVN reported almost 3 years ago now on Germany's demand to repatriate more than 300 tons of its gold reserves back to Germany from the U.S. However, the U.S. only surrendered approximately 5 tons. At this time, it is unclear as to whether or not Germany has since been able to recover their reserves from the U.S. So there is a mystery as to why Canada would sell off what very little reserves it has left. And the bigger question still is who the buyer was of that gold and for what purpose. Now to general news. At this time, it should be no surprise that corrupted government, people, and entities are actively seeking to disrupt the awakening of the human and planetary consciousness at this time. An article appearing on the 21stcenturywire.com website on February 25th from last year has noted the following. Leaked documents open the lid on what is perhaps the most vindictive and disgusting aspect of the government, corporate, joint surveillance state scene yet. Although the story is a year old, it is becoming increasingly more relevant as CVN appears to be taking on a higher profile at this time with new listeners interested in the Mohawk Initiative. This article continues. According to these latest documents, there are paid government agent or contractor persons on social media posing as someone they are not, while on the payroll of the government. Their job is to befriend members of the alternative media, embed themselves in the ebb and flow of day-to-day communications, and then to engage in elaborate subterfuge by any means necessary. The training exercise below uses terms like befriend, infiltrate, mask or mimic, ruse, set up, disrupt, create cognitive stress, use deception, ruin business relationships, and post negative information on appropriate forums, all of which is not only illegal and morally bankrupt, but also runs completely contrary to the very fundamental values and indeed founding principles of a modern, free, democratic society or constitutional republic. Government targets in this malicious operation appear to be bloggers, activists, journalists, social event organizers, and anyone else deemed to be an emerging leader or voice in the public sphere or alternative media online. This obviously extends way beyond the practice of employing paid trolls to pollute comment sections and redirect forum threads, which still exists under both government and corporate umbrellas. It's not possible to expose or catch everyone, and I do believe that the energies of all who support CVN will help to ensure that it is protected on all levels, so that it may continue to serve the highest good of humanity, our planet, and our benevolent galactic family members. I'd like to thank and welcome the growing list of people who are choosing to share a bit of their precious time with CVN, and who are especially taking an interest in the Mohawk Initiative to help themselves, other Indigenous nations, but as well humanity and our planet. I should note that it was my own choice to use this term Mohawk Initiative as a way of simplifying the larger undertakings that are involved with this current action. At some point, there may be numerous things going on all at the same time, but they are interconnected and come back to the very steps that are currently being reported about on this newscast. As this grows, it will have the potential to involve more and more people in different directions and areas of specialty to begin creating the overall goal of having people live empowered, healthy, protected, and abundant ways of living on whichever lands one may choose to live on in the coming moments of now. What this may also mean, however, is that there may be some people who may attempt to discredit those involved, and this may also include CVN and also me. Over the years, the longtime listeners have a pretty good idea of what to expect from me, and it will be important for everyone who is monitoring social media to keep your eyes open for anything that is being claimed as coming from me, especially if it has a negative or fearful tone to it. This is not in the style of CVN, nor is it in my own personal style. If anyone receives any message claiming to come from me or from CVN that is negative or fearful in nature, I ask you to please contact me if you have any doubts or questions as to where it may have come from. Please ask me first before sharing any message that seems suspicious in nature. If you have any doubts about something I have allegedly shared, please do not share it. I cannot monitor all social media, nor do I have the desire to. I am not really concerned about negative things that may be said. However, it is my hope that especially those who have known me for a long time will know whether or not something has truly come from my heart, my mind, and my hands writing it. On other Facebook group pages, I only post the show summary for the current week's broadcast. If I do post an occasional comment or story about something else, it has always been posted on the CVN Facebook page or an associated CVN affiliated page, or possibly on my own personal page. I may also occasionally post things on LinkedIn, YouTube, and the Scene pages. Anything else should be treated with suspicion until it is confirmed by contacting me. I ask that you keep your eyes out for comments from possible trolls who are seeking to disrupt the energies of the newscast and to speak up on my behalf if you feel inclined to do so or to report those individuals to me. I thank you all for your support and for helping to keep an eye out to maintain the positive service that is the vision of this newscast. I thank all the healers who are listening, who are able to share a moment to help keep me and this newscast protected from any energies and entities that may attempt to alter the mission and purpose of CVN in serving for the highest good. Please know how appreciative and grateful I am for this support and for your own service in co-creating this new human and planetary consciousness. Over to science and technology-related news now. Several weeks ago, CVN reported on the alleged discovery of gravitational waves within the universal fabric of space-time. This week, a formal announcement was made via a live stream presentation from several locations, but appeared mostly hosted from the University of Florida. On Thursday, February the 11th, the National Science Foundation brought together scientists from the California Institute of Technology, Caltech, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and the LIGO Scientific Collaboration at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. for a status report on the effort to detect gravitational waves using the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory, or LIGO. The live feed produced the information and details of the science behind the discovery. Up till now, humanity's current public knowledge and exploration of the larger universe has been done by using light. For the purposes of science and exploration, the full light spectrum currently known to the mass public exists in the range from radio waves to microwaves to infrared to the visible spectrum and then into the ultraviolet light waves, X-rays, and then gamma rays. The new discovery claims to validate a theory put out by Albert Einstein. The following is a video attempting to explain the phenomenon as it has been described by the presenters, and perhaps this explanation will be able to mean something for the listeners.
It's the discovery of a lifetime. Physicists have spotted gravitational waves churned up by two black holes locked in a death spiral deep in space. No one has seen such waves before, and they're about to open new eyes on the cosmos. Until now, scientists have learned about the universe mainly by studying light and other electromagnetic waves from space. But gravitational waves are ripples in space itself. They are set off by stellar cataclysms, such as massive neutron stars or black holes whirling together. To sense the waves, physicists use massive L-shaped optical devices called interferometers. Each arm of the L is 4 kilometers long. There are 2 of these devices in the United States, and together they make up LIGO. To detect the stretching of space, LIGO uses laser light to measure and compare the lengths of the 2 arms. When a gravitational wave ripples past, it will stretch the arms by different amounts, causing the light to warble out of the interferometer. The measurements are sensitive, to within 1/10,000th of the width of a proton. Physicists hope to use the waves to test Albert Einstein's theory of gravity, and also to detect strange objects that until now were completely invisible. Take the signal that LIGO detected. The black holes responsible are 3 times as massive as normal, and nobody knows why. It's just the first surprise from what promises to be a whole new type of astronomy.
Now, it's not much of a secret to most listeners that the people and entities that are behind this group known as the Global Cabal have also been sitting on suppressed knowledge and technologies that could have advanced humanity decades ago. The fact that this information is being made known now likely stems from one of 2 possibilities. One, that this is the next wave of information disclosure from the Global Cabal to keep humanity in the illusion that we are progressing and evolving as a species. Or 2, the Global Cabal has begun to lose control over its influence to manipulate and control humanity. And this information is part of a deeper preparation for humanity to understand its place in the bigger picture of human existence and experience. In the interests of presenting a balanced story, there are at least 2 sources that appear to challenge this alleged discovery. What a confusing world we live in, and how does one even begin to weave through the piles of information that are claimed to be truth and the rest that is claimed to be disinformation? Most people are familiar with big oil, big pharma, big medicine, and numerous other bigs that attempt to identify the interests of the Global Cabal within all the respective industries. Perhaps it is now a small surprise that someone would describe big science. It should not be a surprise, really. The former Canadian government under Stephen Harper attempted to put a muzzle on scientists so that they could not reveal information about their research and discoveries to the general public. In some cases, where there is rebellion against the establishment control, then there will be people and entities attempting to control the information that is released to the public. However, what we are all beginning to do now is learn how to ask questions and not just take every announcement as an accepted truth. One individual challenges the discovery of these alleged gravitational waves. His name is Anthony Patch. In commenting about the alleged discovery of gravitational waves, he writes the following on his website. This is pure nonsense, just as black holes are nonsense. The universe is composed of electrically charged particles and plasma. Thus, what mainstream science labels as gravity, gravity waves, and graviton particles is at a minimum misleading the public. At worst, it is a deliberate covering up of the truth as to how the universe and our understanding of its mechanisms described by modern-day physics and science in general. What is important to understand herein is the grander cover story at play, and this is Patch still writing. Today's announcement is on par with that of the purported discovery of the Higgs boson, the so-called God particle, using the Large Hadron Collider at CERN in Switzerland. These two discoveries, I place quotations around this given they are nothing more than imaginary constructs of mainstream scientists. Patch offers that these two so-called discoveries are merely part of Big Science, the group that creates information to be presented to the people to support their own industry through a jobs program, and the discoveries promote and support this. Patch continues, to justify their massive grant programs, to justify the industrial corporations supplying Big Science with their expensive instruments and machines, like the multi-billion-dollar Euro Large Hadron Collider. To justify all of it are experimental projects and programs exactly like the LIGO project mentioned moments ago. Patch goes on to speak about a group called the Thunderbolts Project and claims that he is not a spokesperson, but rather one who, in his words, appreciates their scientific work in debunking the overt adherence by Big Science to the gravity model of the universe and how it operates. Whether looking at the universe from a larger macro level or from the more micro or quantum level, both Patch and the Thunderbolt Project appear to support a different theory that the universe is more electromagnetic than it is gravitational. Patch writes, quietly, in hushed conversations, even those working within Big Science will admit no definitive proof has been derived from the voluminous data generated by the particle collisions within the Large Hadron Collider of the Higgs boson. No proof, no God particle, and no gravitons either. This announcement, this proclamation of proving gravity waves exist, this upholding of Einstein's theories, serves not only as justification of vast expenditures of monies and thus job programs, but diverts the public's attention away from the real Big Science taking place behind closed laboratory doors. The real story is not about Einstein's gravity waves, gravitons, nor the Higgs boson. Patch concludes with the following. The hidden story is the science of Tesla's ether and electromagnetism. Even Einstein promoted Tesla as the real genius. The military-industrial complex hijacked Einstein and stole from Tesla. Both arguments promote their respective theories in a fairly compelling way, and it will be up to each individual to take the information offered and attempt to find something meaningful, if one feels interested in doing so. My scientific knowledge is not extensive enough to claim that one of these points of view is any more accurate than the other. From what I think I know, however, about the work of Nikola Tesla and the fact that Patch acknowledges Tesla's information as being closer to the truth, and given the fact that Tesla's work has been covered up for decades, I might be inclined to lean towards the announcement of gravitational waves as being a possible weapon of mass distraction for the purposes of securing more funding for black budget projects as the global cabal loses more and more ground in its continued control of humanity. I am, however, open to being proven wrong on this. Among those who have a strong familiarity with a wide variety of internet sources of entertainment, the name Pirate Bay is likely to at least ring a bell. Pirate Bay is a source known for making content available to people free for downloading. For all the lovers of science out there, it seems there is now a Pirate Bay for science. According to Fiona MacDonald, in an article appearing February 12th on the Science Alert website, MacDonald writes that a researcher in Russia has made more than 48 million journal articles, almost every single peer-reviewed paper ever published, freely available online. And now she's refusing to shut the site down despite a court injunction and a lawsuit from Elsevier, one of the world's biggest publishers. It seems Russia is becoming synonymous with anything and everything that has the potential to collapse the global cabal's efforts to control everything, including the release of scientific information to only those who can afford to pay for it. The article continues. It was established in 2011 by neuroscientist Alexandra Elbakyan, who was frustrated that she couldn't afford to access the articles needed for her research. And since it's gone viral, with hundreds of thousands of papers being downloaded daily. But at the end of last year, the site was ordered to be taken down by a New York District Court, a ruling that Elbakyan has decided to fight, triggering a debate over who really owns science. According to Elbakyan, in an interview with Torrent Freak last year, payment of $32 is just insane when you need to skim or read tens or hundreds of these papers to do research. I obtained these papers by pirating them. Everyone should have access to knowledge, regardless of their income or affiliation. The article acknowledges that it is not only the poor who are complaining about the high fees of Elsevier, but even prestigious universities such as Harvard and Cornell are complaining about the high fees. In an attempt to profit excessively while only allowing information to get into the hands of the people who are part of the more privileged side of society. The article also does note the good things that the publishing industry has done in the past, but notes that today's competitive environment is corrupting this industry, just as it has been corrupting so many other industries. MacDonald writes, in recent years, more and more people are beginning to question whether they're still helping the progress of science. In fact, in some cases, the publish or perish mentality is creating more problems than solutions, with a number of predatory publishers now charging researchers to have their own work published, often without any proper peer review process or even editing. This is where Sci-Hub offers its services. MacDonald explains. The site works in two stages. First of all, when you search for a paper, Sci-Hub tries to immediately download it from fellow pirate database LibGen. If that doesn't work, Sci-Hub is able to bypass journal paywalls thanks to a range of access keys that have been donated by anonymous academics. This means that Sci-Hub can instantly access any paper published by the big guys, including JSTOR, Springer, Sage, and Elsevier, and deliver it to you for free within seconds. The site then automatically sends a copy of that paper to LibGen to help share the love. Simon Oxenham, in his own article about Elbakyan, felt the site is an ingenious creation and was quoted as saying that, in one fell swoop, a network has been created that likely has a greater level of access to science than any individual university or even government, for that matter, anywhere in the world. Sci-Hub represents the sum of countless different universities' institutional access, literally a world of knowledge. Elbakyan is, of course, facing a huge legal battle now, and instead of backing down, she is standing up and taking them on, even while facing the possibility of millions of dollars in damages. Elbakyan, however, believes that Elsevier has the illegal business model, and she refers to Article 27 of the UN Declaration of Human Rights, which states the following: everyone has the right freely to participate in the cultural life of the community, to enjoy the arts, and to share in scientific advancement and its benefits. As far as the comparison to Pirate Bay, however, Elbakian states that there is a big difference between the two. She is quoted as saying that all papers on their website are written by researchers, and the researchers do not receive money from what Elsevier collects. That is very different from the music or movie industry, where creators receive money from each copy sold. If Elsevier manages to shut down our projects or force them into the darknet, that will demonstrate an important idea, that the public does not have the right to knowledge. We have to win over Elsevier and other publishers and show that what these commercial companies are doing is fundamentally wrong. The article notes in its conclusion that Elbakian is somewhat protected by the fact that she's in Russia and doesn't have any U.S. assets. So even if Elsevier wins their lawsuit, it's going to be pretty hard for them to get the money. The Sci-Hub website itself shares the following message. At this time, the widest possible distribution of research papers, as well as of other scientific or educational sources, is artificially restricted by copyright laws. Such laws effectively slow down the development of science in human society. The Sci-Hub project, running from September 5th, 2011, is challenging the status quo. We fight inequality in knowledge access across the world. We advocate for cancellation of intellectual property or copyright laws for scientific and educational purposes. The Sci-Hub project supports open access movement in science. Research should be published in open access, meaning free to read. We stand against unfair gain that publishers collect by creating limits to knowledge distribution. So for those who are interested in scientific research, this may be your way to improve your knowledge and perhaps take a stand against corporate controls. CVN is not advocating the practice of illegal downloading of materials, but is advocating the right of people to have access to material that is meaningful for them and for the highest good of humanity. When rights and freedoms are being continuously stripped away from humanity without their knowledge and informed consent, there are times when the people must find their own ways to reclaim those rights and freedoms, and some courageous people are willing and able to take risks that others may not yet be prepared and willing to do. This, however, is changing more and more. The link to Sci-Hub and to the articles will appear in the show summary for this story. Finally, in health news, since the news lately has been taking on the theme of the reawakening Earth wisdom that the global cabal has been attempting to suppress and even kill off in certain situations through genocide, it is perhaps appropriate this week to report on the attempts of one indigenous nation to preserve the ancient healing wisdom before the elders pass on to the world of spirit and take their knowledge with them. An article appearing on the herbs-info.com website has reported that remarkable news has recently surfaced that the Matses peoples of Brazil and Peru have created an astonishing 500-page encyclopedia of their traditional medicine. It's the first time a project like this has been accomplished. With the help of Acate Amazon Conservation, a non-profit dedicated to helping the indigenous peoples of the Amazon to live sustainably and protect their incredible rainforest, 5 elder shamans of the Matses have detailed every plant used in their medicinal system for a wide variety of ailments. The health of Amazon tribes has been preserved through the passing down through the centuries of this deep knowledge of medicinal plants of the rainforest. It is perhaps one of the greatest tragedies of modern times that indigenous cultures, together with their knowledge, stories, and traditions, are vanishing into the mists of time. One of the saddest facts is that these master herbalists were told by government workers and missionaries that their ancient knowledge was useless. Anyone with any experience of herbalism, of course, knows better, but once again, it is a race against time. All over the world, the knowledge of herbalists is being lost. The article continues, offering that it has been demonstrated many times that once tribes make contact with the outside world, their original knowledge rapidly becomes lost. Until now, the Matsesa's natural medicine system has been an oral tradition, with the knowledge taught from one person to another without being written down. The Encyclopedia Project was 2 years' work. It's the first time that something like this has been done, and in the original languages of the Matseis was used in order to protect the information for future generations of their own people, rather than for foreign corporations to exploit. It was a surprise to learn that there are no plans to translate it into Spanish or English, but it makes sense, because this isn't about us. Although the medicines that are used by these people will not be accessible to us, they will be preserved for the future, which is an essential step forward in the protection of a fragile, remarkable world that has almost been lost. The website acateamazon.org offers a bit more information about the project. On the website, it is written that the erosion of traditional medicine and culture has imparted a devastating effect on the self-sufficiency and health of indigenous peoples worldwide. The acculturation of Amazonian peoples has been, at best, a difficult transition. Most tribes usually suffer a profound loss of cultural identity and social cohesion, if not extinction. Traditional knowledge and beliefs are no longer valued and passed down to younger generations. As a result, much of the wisdom of the elders, including the healing knowledge of the shamans, is being irreplaceably lost at a rapid pace. Lacking their own systems of healing, these tribes become totally dependent on the rudimentary external health care available in remote and low external resource settings. It's no coincidence that in every country of South America, indigenous peoples have the highest rates of disease and mortality. Acate seeks to maintain self-sufficiency of health care through the promotion of traditional systems of medicine. Acate provides programmatic support for elder tribal shamans to teach and impart the knowledge of the rainforest to younger generations of Matseis, as well as to document and preserve in their own language their use of medicinal plants for the benefit of future generations. The work of Acate, according to the website, is to explore and develop alternative approaches to bring viable long-term projects to generate revenue for Matseis communities and provide alternatives for unsustainable and destructive activities. These include the sustainable harvest and marketing of non-timber forest products with medicinal or cosmetic values, such as copaiba and sangre de grado. We work with the communities to identify and demarcate locations of trees within their territories, in addition to collaborating with consultants to develop optimal techniques for sustainable extraction of non-timber forest products. Although it is unfortunate that there are no plans to translate this into English or Spanish at this time, it is perhaps understandable, as mentioned moments ago, given the greedy and selfish nature of Big Pharma, to attempt to patent and commercialize synthetic and often dangerous copies of natural items that cannot be patented for commercial profit. It is an act of empowerment and self-preservation in a world that requires humans on all levels to stand up to the slavery and control that have been imposed upon humanity without lawful and knowing consent. As the global cabal is removed from power more and more, and as indigenous nations worldwide begin to use the internet to connect, to share, to support, and to empower others to bring their own earth wisdom forward, perhaps other indigenous groups will feel inclined to create a digital record of their own natural medicines that can be shared with all who choose to live on indigenous lands in the future under the great tree of peace in honor to our sacred planet that sustains us. This is one small part of the Mohawk Initiative, as lands are reclaimed, so that people choosing to live on these lands will have the benefits of health and healing that exist outside of the controls and damage of Big Pharma and Big Medicine. In this week's Final Words, there are several recurring themes that are becoming signs of the current period of change we are in. People will speak or write about the changes that we're going through, and the changes do very much sound positive and increasingly more possible, given what we are witnessing in the world at this time with the collapsing structures of the global cabal and the awakening of humanity to begin questioning all that is unfolding. People have often said, and yes, I have been among those people saying this, that it is important to focus on that which we are wanting to experience as opposed to that which we no longer desire to experience. On some levels, it does appear to be working because we are collectively beginning to witness change that may not have been thought possible as little as 3 or 4 years ago. However, things do not always manifest in the world of an individual who places his or her faith in a product or service that has been sold and marketed by so-called spiritual gurus. On one level, the mind reads or experiences the material and understands it, but on another level, many have difficulty transferring that knowing into a practical manifestation of that knowing. I acknowledge that in my personal world, I have an awareness and knowledge of a vast abundance of information, but I have not always been able to translate that into a physical manifestation that supports me. Like many listeners, I have, in the past, wondered why. I cannot deny that I, and only I, am responsible for what I experience and create. I have spoken in the past about so-called spiritual gurus who sell and market their products and services as though their wisdom is the one true answer for all of humanity, without their telling people the honest truth that their message may not be the answer that some are needing to hear in the current moment. The message may be good, and yes, it may be meaningful for many, but countless people buy books and services, making others rich without getting the benefits that others seem to get from the books or the services. This is not to say that the so-called gurus are bad people. They are not. They each believe that they have an important message to share, and they do in their uniquely different and equally beautiful way. Why do I offer my newscast for free? My belief is this. I know that journalism is a perspective of the one who is doing the reporting. I know that what I share is a reflection of how I am seeing and perceiving the world at this time. I acknowledge that I have made mistakes in judgment in the past in reporting on stories I believed were true at the time, and used sources that I believed were honorable at the time. And now I question those stories and those sources. My newscast will not be for everyone, but it has remained my hope that those who do receive benefit from what I share will find it worthwhile to support, to continue this. Just like Alexandra Elbakian, who is releasing scientific papers free for humanity, I have believed that people deserve access to information of a different perspective in order that one may begin to explore within oneself what is true and not true to that individual in the current moment of now. There are those who argue that I do not value my work if I am not willing to charge for it, and thus why should people get it? Because it seems our society has been conditioned into a belief that something is only as valuable as the money one is willing to put out to receive it. Those who have supported it in whatever ways they are best able to do in the current moment has been profoundly and most graciously appreciated. This is part of the conditioning humanity has gone through, particularly within the more Western world psychology. The shift, however, is hitting the fan. I know some international listeners may not understand the reference in that expression, but it simply means that things are getting real and that the crap of what has been going on in this world As it hits the fan of truth, it's going to be splattered out in countless directions, making a mess. It is a mess that we all will have to clean up, but the longer humanity waits, the bigger the mess will be, and arguably it will also be more painful over a longer period of time. It does not have to be this way. We've been conditioned into beliefs that make us more reluctant to change. If one's habits happen to be particularly healthy or beneficial, then things will work out well, or at least better, for this individual than for others, whose habits are less healthy or less beneficial for humanity and our planet. I came across a video clip from Dr. Bruce Lipton when he spoke at the Uplift conference in Australia in 2014. Bruce Lipton is the author of the book, The Biology of Belief, and it has been mentioned on this newscast several times over the last few years. In this audio clip that you are about to hear, Lipton focuses on the programmable mind and how the conscious mind and the subconscious mind learn differently, and how this impacts whether or not one truly benefits from information presented to an individual. Collectively, humanity is in the process of going through changes from the cellular level to the Earth level and even beyond Earth. Many are experiencing these changes in their own uniquely different ways, and thus may require different sources and messages for learning how to cope and adapt to what they are feeling at this time. The more resistant one is, the more difficult it will be, and the more open-minded and open-hearted one is, the easier it will be to adapt to these energies of change and progress forward in one's service to humanity and our planet. It is my hope that at least some of you will find something meaningful in this clip from Bruce Lipton. Create a wonderful week. Until our next moment of now, here is Dr. Bruce Lipton speaking on the programmable mind.
Your life is coming from your program. And why is that relevant? Because I said, think about it this way. I take 3 different cells, and I say, oh, Muslim cell, Jewish cell, Christian cell. I say, oh, are they different entities? I go, no. Those religious things are programs that are downloaded into the mind of the child. What was most important? They all come from the same source. They all represent the same spirit coming to the planet. Your source is not the program. You can take a child from one religion as an infant and have it adopted by another family from a different religion. The child grows up in that religion. The religion wasn't built into the system. It was a program. We've been programmed. And I said, what's the function of the programs? And the answer is this. The mind is designed to take your programs and your beliefs and turn them into reality. This simple sentence is very profound and complex when you get down to it. The function of your mind is to create coherence between what you believe and the life reality you experience. Henry Ford said it simply. He said, if you believe you can or you believe you can't, you're right. Meaning what? Whatever your belief is. If you believe you're going to be a lovable person, then you're a lovable person. If you believe you're not a lovable person, then you're not a lovable person. That was in the belief, but the mind wanted to make sure your beliefs are real. And then it turns out, why is the subconscious so important? Because we now know a simple point. The conscious mind can think. I say to you, what are you doing next Thursday? If you actually contemplate what I just said, then your mind will go in a Rolodex in your head and think, what the hell am I doing on Thursday? I say, why is that relevant? Because the moment I asked you that, you're not paying attention. I go, oh, so when your mind is thinking, you're not like walk down the street, have a thought. Okay, thought's over, I got it now. You keep walking. I say, why? Because the moment your conscious mind's not paying attention, the default program in the subconscious takes over. And the relevance about that is scientists tell us that we are only conscious 5% of the day. 5% of the day comes from creative wishes, desires, and aspirations. 95% comes from the program. And the issue about that is we have now been realizing the fact that 70% or so of our programs are disempowering, limiting, and really undermining who we are. We were told what we could do and what we couldn't do. If that's your program, then you can do what you were told, and you can't do what you told you couldn't do. We become the program. So the relevance about this is simple. In fact, it's that we only come 5% from the creative mind, 95% from the subconscious mind. I go, why is that relevant? Creative minds, wishes, desires, aspirations. I go, yeah, but you're not creating your life from that. You're creating your life from what? Acquired programs that you got from other people. You are living other people's lives 95% of the day. And that's why you might have trouble with your wishes of being successful and happy being compromised by the behavior you're playing. Because the behavior isn't yours. It was programmed by other people. The Jesuits knew this 400 years ago. They would boast. Give me a child until it's 7. It will belong to the church for the rest of its life. Think about what that means. If you give your education to somebody else for 7 years, then 95% of your life comes from that program, not your program. They were talking about programming, manipulating you. And the relevance when I brought this picture up after getting to this point about programming, and we were in Uplift Middle East, and the audience was gagged, they were understanding, I got this program, the program runs 95% of the time, and I said, here's the problem. Why have they been fighting for so long in the Middle East? I said, look, you program kids to play with guns. You put kids in military uniforms to play with guns and to kill the enemy. If that's the program, then 95% of their life comes from that. Even if they don't want to fight, that's not relevant. 95% of their life is going to put them into the fight. I said, what's the resolution? The solution? The answer was simple. Allow children to share their love, to share their community, because when they're outside of the program, they're humans. And as humans, they work together in the collective evolution of this planet. Peace comes from helping our children not acquire those negative programs.
So that is a sample of the unfolding higher consciousness news around the world this week. Cosmic Vision News is broadcast weekly from the CosmicVisionNews.com website. Links to stories used in this broadcast are published in the show summary, which is available on the blog from the website. CVN can be followed through the Facebook page, Scene page, YouTube channel, as well as on Twitter, Google+, and LinkedIn. Thank you for sharing your time with me. I'm Jeffrey West, reminding you that you are not merely a drop in the ocean. Rather, you are the ocean in a drop. Until our next moment of now, stay grounded in love, hold the vision of light and peace in your hearts, and keep your eyes to the skies. Disclosure is unfolding all around you. Namaste.